The moment I pushed open that heavy oak door, I knew my life was about to shatter into a million pieces. There stood my daughter Sophia, right in the center of our living room, her face twisted with a rage I'd never seen before. Next to her, Daniel paced like a trapped wolf, his phone clutched so tight in his hand that his knuckles had gone completely white. They didn't even give me a second to catch my breath or set down my purse. "Have you completely lost your mind, Mother?" Sophia's voice cut through the air like a knife. She marched toward me, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with each angry step. Daniel nearly collapsed at the ATM today. His heart was racing so fast he thought he was dying. Her words bounced off the cream-colored walls, filled with a poison that used to hurt me deeply. But today, something was different. Today, those words just rolled off me like water off a duck's back. Daniel rushed toward me, shoving his phone right in my face, so close I could see the reflection of his bloodshot eyes on the screen. "Where's the money, Victoria? What the hell did you do?" His voice cracked with desperation. "There's nothing, not a single penny. The card came up empty." That money belonged to me. Every cent of it was mine, my pension, the result of 44 years of breaking my back at the medical supply factory. 44 years of waking up when the stars were still out, of coming home when my feet felt like they were on fire, of ignoring the constant ache in my lower back that had become my unwanted companion. I set my worn leather purse down on the small table by the entrance with a calmness that surprised even me. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "I changed my banking details," I said, meeting both of their eyes without flinching. My voice came out steady and clear. "My pension now goes into a new account, one that only I have access to, one that only I control." The silence that crashed down on us was so thick you could almost touch it. Sophia's mouth fell open, but no words came out. She just stood there, frozen like a statue. Daniel's face went from bright crimson to a sickly pale white in seconds. It was like watching all the color drain from a painting. Time seemed to stop completely. You know that moment right before a storm hits when everything goes quiet? That's exactly what it felt like. "What?" Sophia finally managed to whisper, pressing her hand against her chest like she was trying to hold her heart inside. "What did you just say? Mom, you can't do this. You can't. We need that money. We depend on it. We have bills stacking up. We have people we owe." "Bills?" I repeated slowly, feeling something harden inside my chest like steel being forged. "Are you talking about Daniel's brand new sports car? The one with the leather seats that cost more than most people's annual salary? Or maybe that vacation you two took to Hawaii last month? 10 days of paradise while I stayed here eating canned soup. Or perhaps you mean that enormous flat-screen television that takes up half the living room wall, the one you bought 3 weeks ago." Daniel took a threatening step forward, his index finger pointed at me like a weapon. "You live in our house," he said, spitting the words out. "You eat our food. You use our electricity. Contributing your pension is the absolute least you can do." A bitter laugh rose up from somewhere deep in my throat. "Our house," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "How interesting that you call it that now, especially since the property deed still has my late husband's name on it. Thomas Hartley, and my name right beside his, Victoria Hartley. This house that we bought, with every penny we could scrape together, working double shifts, sacrificing vacations and new clothes and nights out. This house we built our entire life around is now your house in your vocabulary, Daniel." I took a deep breath and stood up straighter. "This is my house, mine. You two came here to live 3.5 years ago. Do you remember why? Do you remember that night you showed up at my door with 6 suitcases and tears streaming down both your faces? You'd lost your apartment because you couldn't make rent for 3 months straight." Sophia let out a strangled cry, like I'd physically struck her. "I cannot believe you're speaking to me this way. I'm your daughter, your only child. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" Tears started rolling down her cheeks, but they were tears of fury, not sadness. I knew those tears well. I'd seen them 1,000 times since she was a little girl, whenever she didn't get her way. "Everything you've done for me," I repeated, and the words came out colder than I meant them to. "Tell me, Sophia, what exactly have you done for me? Please, I'd love to hear it. She stammered, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. We give you a place to live. We take care of you. We make sure you're safe and comfortable. You take care of me? I interrupted, feeling decades of silence breaking inside me, like a dam that had finally cracked. Is that what you call it? You take care of me when you bang on my door at 5:30 in the morning demanding breakfast? When I have to wash every piece of clothing you own, including Daniel's work shirts that he somehow manages to stain every single day? When I scrub the bathroom that you leave looking like a disaster zone? Is that your version of taking care of me? Daniel slammed his fist against the wall so hard that our wedding photo, the one that had hung there for 47 years, rattled on its nail. I watched it swing back and forth, Thomas's smiling face blurring with the motion. You are an ungrateful, bitter old woman, Daniel said through clenched teeth. Without us, you'd be rotting away in some depressing nursing home, probably sharing a room with 3 other forgotten old ladies, eating pureed food, watching the same game show reruns every day until you die. His words should have destroyed me. 6 months ago, they would have sent me to my room in tears. But today, after everything I'd been through, after the humiliation I'd swallowed in silence, after the nights I spent crying into my pillow while they laughed in the living room, spending my $1,800 a month on things I'd never see or touch, those words just bounced right off me. Maybe you're right, I said, picking up my purse again. Maybe I am a bitter old woman. But this bitter old woman just got her freedom back. And let me tell you something, Daniel. That feels better than anything has felt in 3.5 years. Sophia collapsed onto the sofa, the same one I'd paid for when theirs fell apart. Her hands shook as she covered her face. You can't do this to us, Mom. Please, you have to understand. Daniel has medical expenses. I have student loans that are killing us. We have commitments, financial obligations. You're going to destroy us. You're going to ruin our entire lives. I'm going to ruin you, I said slowly, letting each word settle into the heavy air between us. That's interesting. For 3.5 years, you've lived entirely off my pension. Every single dollar I earned with my sweat, my aching back, my ruined knees. And now that I've decided that money is mine again, suddenly I'm the one ruining you? Daniel approached me again, but this time something different flickered in his eyes. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was fear. Real, genuine fear. The kind of fear that comes when someone realizes their cash machine has just shut down permanently. Victoria, let's be reasonable adults here, he said, forcing his voice to sound softer, but he couldn't quite hide the desperation underneath. We can work something out. You don't need to be so extreme about this. I looked at this man who had entered my family 8 years ago, with his charming smile and his promises to love and protect my daughter. The same man who now looked at me like I was nothing more than a resource to be mined until there was nothing left. The only arrangement we're going to have, I said as I walked toward the staircase leading to my bedroom, is that from this day forward, my money belongs to me alone. And if that bothers either of you, well, the front door is right there. You both know where it is. You've walked through it plenty of times spending my money at restaurants and bars. I left them standing there in the middle of the living room, their mouths hanging open, their carefully constructed plans crumbling around them like a house of cards in a strong wind. I climbed each step slowly, feeling an enormous weight lifting from my shoulders with every step I took. It had taken me 71 years to learn this lesson, but I'd finally learned it. Love cannot be purchased. Real family doesn't exploit you and drain you dry, and it is never ever too late to reclaim your dignity. Behind me, I could hear Sophia's broken sobs and Daniel's muffled curses, but for the first time in 3.5 years, those sounds didn't tear my heart apart. They only reminded me exactly why I'd made the most important decision of my life that morning when I walked into First National Bank and spoke the words that would change everything. I need to change my banking information, I'd told the young woman behind the desk. I need a new account, a new card, something that no one else can access or touch. Something that's completely and utterly mine. If you feel my words reaching into your heart right now, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me, which city are you listening from? I want to see just how far a woman's voice can travel, when she finally decides to speak her truth. Help me build this community so we can share more stories like mine, stories that need to be heard. It all started 3.5 years ago, at my husband Thomas's funeral. I can still smell those white carnations, mixed with the scent of coffee, that our neighbors had prepared for everyone who came to pay their respects. I remember Sophia's hands squeezing mine so tight as we watched them lower that mahogany casket into the ground, taking with it 47 years of my life, 47 years of shared laughter and quiet Sunday morning breakfasts, and silly arguments about whose turn it was to take out the trash, and sweet reconciliations that always ended with us holding hands on our old porch swing. Thomas died on a Wednesday afternoon, a massive heart attack that came out of nowhere. He'd been out in our garden, trimming the hedges he was so proud of, those perfectly shaped boxwoods that lined our walkway. One moment, he was humming some old song from the 70s. The next moment, he was on the ground. By the time the ambulance arrived, sirens wailing through our quiet neighborhood, it was already too late. The young paramedic with kind eyes told me he didn't suffer, that it was instantaneous, that he probably didn't feel any pain. But I suffered. God in heaven, how I suffered. Those first few months in our empty house were a special kind of torture. Every single corner screamed his absence. His favorite coffee mug sitting in the cabinet, the one that said "World's Best Dad," that Sophia had given him 20 years ago. His reading glasses on the nightstand, forever waiting for eyes that would never see through them again. His toothbrush in the holder, which I couldn't bring myself to throw away for 8 months. I'd wake up at 3 a.m, expecting to hear him snoring softly beside me, and reality would crash into me every single time, like a wave of ice water. Sophia visited often at first. She'd sit on our living room couch, the one with the faded floral pattern that Thomas and I had picked out together at a yard sale 30 years ago. "Mom, you can't stay here alone," she'd say, tucking her long dark hair behind her ears the way she'd done since she was a little girl. "Come stay with us for a while, just until you find your footing again. Just until the grief isn't so crushing." Daniel would nod beside her, his smile seeming so genuine back then, so full of what I thought was real concern for his grieving mother-in-law. "We have that extra bedroom," he'd add. "It's not much, but it's comfortable. You shouldn't be alone right now, Victoria. It's not healthy." I resisted for weeks and weeks. This house held everything. Every memory of Thomas lived in these walls. The kitchen where he'd dance with me while we cooked dinner, the living room where we'd watched our daughter grow up, the bedroom where we'd whispered our dreams and fears to each other in the darkness. But loneliness is a heavy thing. It pressed down on my chest until some days I could barely breathe. The silence became so loud it felt like it was screaming at me. So finally, on a gray October morning, I gave in. "Just for a little while," I told them, packing 2 small suitcases with some clothes and toiletries. "Just until I figure out how to be alone." I packed up my essentials. Some comfortable clothes, photos of Thomas at different stages of our life together, the green knitted blanket he'd given me for our 25th anniversary, the one I'd cried into every night since he died. I closed the door of my home with tears streaming down my face, promising myself I'd be back soon. I'd come home once I was stronger. How foolish I was. How completely and utterly blind. The first couple of months at Sophia's place were tolerable. She worked at an upscale boutique in the city center, selling expensive clothes to wealthy women who had more money than sense. Daniel was supposedly job hunting after being let go from his position at some tech startup. He'd spend hours on his laptop, claiming he was sending out resumes and networking. I helped around the house. I cooked meals, I cleaned, I did laundry. It made me feel useful in my grief. It made me feel like I was earning my keep, contributing something valuable. But things started changing in small ways I didn't recognize as warning signs. First, Daniel asked to borrow $300 for a certification course that would supposedly help him land a better job. "I'll pay you back next month, Victoria. I promise on my life. This course is going to change everything for us." He never paid it back. Not a single penny. Then Sophia needed $400 for a credit card payment that was supposedly urgent. "Mom, if I don't pay this by Friday, the interest is going to skyrocket. It'll bury us. Please, I'm begging you." I never saw that money again either. At first, I didn't mind at all. They were my family, my only family left in this entire world. If my money could ease their burden, why shouldn't I share it? Thomas always used to say that family came first, that money was just paper and numbers, but blood ties were forever. I believed those words like they were written in stone. One evening, Daniel came to me with what he called a proposal. We were sitting at their small kitchen table, and he had that serious look on his face that people get when they're about to ask for something big. "Victoria, I've been thinking about something, and I want to run it by you," he said, folding his hands on the table. "It would be so much easier if your pension went directly into our joint account. That way, we can manage all the household expenses together. You won't have to worry about a single thing. We'll handle everything. Bills, groceries, utilities, all of it. You can just relax and heal." He made it sound so logical, like he was doing me a favor. Sophia backed him up immediately, jumping in before I could even process what he was asking. "It's true, Mom. It would be so much simpler. Besides, you were never good with managing money. Remember how Dad handled all the finances? He kept the checkbook balanced, paid all the bills, made all the big decisions. We'll do the same thing for you. We'll take care of everything so you don't have to stress." Their words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. They sounded so caring, so concerned about my well-being. I signed the papers at the bank without reading the fine print. I gave them access to my debit card. I handed over control of my $1,800 a month without asking a single question. After all, I was living under their roof, eating food they bought, using their hot water and electricity. It seemed like the fair thing to do, the grateful thing to do. The change in their behavior was so gradual, I didn't notice it until I was already trapped. Daniel started treating me less like a family member and more like hired help. "Victoria, breakfast is taking too long. I have an important meeting." "Victoria, you didn't iron my shirts correctly. Do them over." "Victoria, the bathroom is filthy. There are streaks on the mirror and toothpaste in the sink." Sophia stopped asking about my day, about my feelings, about how I was coping with losing Thomas. Those conversations just evaporated like morning dew. We only talked about chores that needed doing, groceries that needed buying, meals that needed preparing. I'd become invisible in that house, a useful ghost who cooked and cleaned and paid bills without complaint. On Friday and Saturday nights, they'd go out to expensive restaurants that I'd see the receipts from later. Places with names in French that I couldn't pronounce. "These places are too loud for you, Mom. At your age, you need peace and quiet," Sophia would say while putting on a coral dress that I knew cost at least $400. Money that came directly from my pension. Money I'd earned standing on my feet for 8-hour shifts. I'd stay home eating leftovers or sometimes just toast and tea, watching old movies on the television in the tiny room they'd given me at the back of their apartment. The room that was barely bigger than a closet. The room with one small window that looked out onto an alley where stray cats fought over garbage. One afternoon, while I was wiping down their kitchen counters, I found a crumpled receipt shoved behind the coffee maker. It was from an exclusive jewelry store at the mall, the kind of place with security guards and glass cases. Daniel had bought Sophia a diamond bracelet for $2,300. My heart sank straight down to my feet. While I wore the same 4 faded dresses I brought from my home, rotating them week after week, while I denied myself small pleasures like a new book from the bookstore, or a slice of cake from the bakery I used to love, they were buying diamond bracelets. With my money, with the money I'd earned by destroying my body for 44 years. I started paying closer attention after that, really watching, really seeing. The pattern became crystal clear once I knew what to look for. The nights out at clubs and bars, the new clothes that appeared in Sophia's closet every single week, like magic. Designer purses, expensive shoes. The luxury car Daniel bought, claiming it was from his savings, even though he hadn't held a job in over 2 years. It all came together like pieces of a horrible puzzle. My pension wasn't being used for household expenses like they claimed. Not even close. It was financing a lifestyle they couldn't afford on their own. A lifestyle built entirely on my broken back. I tried talking to Sophia one night while we were washing dishes together. She was scrubbing a pot, and I was drying plates with an old dish towel. "Sweetheart, I've been thinking," I started carefully, my hands trembling slightly as I set down a plate. "Maybe it's time for me to go back to my own house. Enough time has passed since your father died. I need to learn how to live on my own. I need to face it eventually." She turned to look at me with eyes that had gone cold, so different from the warm, loving eyes of the little girl I'd raised. The little girl who used to climb into my lap and tell me I was the best mommy in the whole world. "Go back to your house?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mom, don't be ridiculous. That house is falling apart. The roof probably leaks. The plumbing is ancient. Besides, how would you manage alone at your age? What if you fell and broke your hip? What if you had a stroke or a heart attack? Here you're safe. Here you're looked after." But there was no love in her voice when she said those words. There was only calculation. Cold, hard calculation. That night, I cried myself to sleep in my tiny back room, hugging my pillow to muffle the sounds so they wouldn't hear me. I missed Thomas, with a pain so intense it felt like my chest was being crushed. He would never have allowed this. He would have stood up for me. He would have seen what was happening and put a stop to it immediately. But Thomas was gone, buried 6 feet underground in Cedar Hills Cemetery, and I was completely alone, facing a reality I desperately didn't want to accept. My own daughter, the baby I'd nursed through countless midnight feedings, the toddler whose scraped knees I'd kissed better, the teenager whose broken heart I'd mended after her first boyfriend dumped her, was using me. She was draining me dry, like I was nothing more than a resource, a bank account with a pulse. But I still didn't have the courage to do anything about it. I still clung to hope, like a drowning person clings to driftwood. Hope that things would improve. Hope that this was just a difficult phase. Hope that the love we'd once shared would resurface. I lied to myself every single morning when my alarm went off at 5. I lied to myself every night when I finally collapsed into bed, exhausted and aching. I swallowed every humiliation because facing the alternative was too painful. The alternative meant accepting that I'd lost not only my beloved husband, but also my only child. Months bled into each other, and the situation only got worse. Daniel didn't even pretend to look for work anymore. He'd sleep until noon, eat the breakfast I'd prepared without a single word of thanks, and spend the rest of the day planted on their couch, watching sports or playing video games with the volume turned up so loud it gave me headaches. Sophia would come home from work and immediately disappear into their bedroom to talk on the phone with her friends, laughing about their upcoming shopping trips and spa days. One Friday night, I was cleaning their kitchen after they'd left for dinner when I found a bank statement in the trash. It was crumpled up like someone had tried to hide it. My hands shook as I smoothed it out under the kitchen light, and what I read made my blood run cold. They'd spent $4,200 that month alone. Restaurants, bars, clothing boutiques, luxury spas, a weekend getaway to some resort in the mountains. My pension was $1,800. I looked more carefully at the statement and found the answer. Credit cards, multiple credit cards with balances in the thousands, cards that were being paid for, or barely paid for, with my money from next month's pension. I sat down heavily in one of their kitchen chairs, feeling like the world was spinning around me. They weren't just spending my pension. They were drowning in debt, living far beyond any reasonable means, and using my monthly check as a flimsy Band-Aid over a wound that kept getting bigger and bigger. How much longer could this possibly continue? What would happen when my money wasn't enough anymore? Would they kick me out? Would they force me to sell my home to pay for their endless luxuries? That night, staring at the water-stained ceiling of my cramped little room, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I needed to know the truth. I needed to see exactly what was happening with my money. I needed hard evidence before I could do anything about it. And most importantly, I needed to find a way to take back even a small piece of the control I'd surrendered. The next morning, I got up before dawn like always. I made coffee, the rich smell filling the quiet kitchen. I cooked scrambled eggs and bacon, set the table with their nice plates. My mind was racing the entire time, working on a plan. When Daniel and Sophia finally stumbled out of their bedroom, still half asleep, I was ready. "I need to go to the bank this morning," I announced, pouring coffee into Sophia's favorite mug. "There are some documents about your father's estate that I need to sign, things I've been putting off for too long." Daniel's head snapped up so fast I thought he might hurt his neck. His eyes went sharp with suspicion. "Why do you need to go to the bank? If you need something, I can handle it for you." His tone was too controlling, too anxious, like he was afraid of what I might discover. "It's personal," I replied, keeping my voice steady, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Estate documents, inheritance paperwork, legal things I have to sign in person." Sophia exchanged a worried look with Daniel across the table. "Mom, I don't think you should go anywhere alone. You might get confused. Why don't I come with you after my shift ends? We can go together this afternoon." But I knew if she came with me, I'd never get the answers I desperately needed. "I'll go alone," I said with a firmness that surprised even me. "I'm 71 years old, not 90. I'm perfectly capable of taking a bus to the bank and back." Before either of them could argue further, I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. My hands were shaking, but I didn't let them see it. I walked out into the cool morning air, feeling like I was walking towards something huge and life-changing, even though I had no idea just how huge it would turn out to be. The bus ride to First National Bank took about 25 minutes through morning traffic. I sat by a window, watching the city wake up around me. People rushing to work with their coffee cups, store owners opening their shops. The world continuing on like it always did, completely unaware that my entire life was about to change. My heart pounded the entire way. What was I going to find out? Did I really want to know the complete truth? But it was too late to turn back now. I'd crossed a line that morning, and there was no going back across it. When I walked into the bank, the cool air conditioning hit me immediately. A young woman with bright red hair and kind eyes approached me with a professional smile. Her name tag said Margaret. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" I took a deep breath. I need to see every single transaction on my account for the last 3.5 years. All the deposits and all the withdrawals. I want a complete, detailed statement of everything. Margaret nodded without judgment, which I was grateful for. She led me to her desk and started typing rapidly on her computer. After what felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes, papers started printing. Page after page after page. When the printer finally stopped, there was a stack nearly 2 inches thick, sitting in front of me. "Would you like to review these here, or would you prefer to take them home?" Margaret asked gently. "I'll look at them here," I said, taking the heavy stack with hands that were barely trembling anymore. Something had hardened inside me during that bus ride. A determination that felt like iron. I sat in one of the comfortable chairs in the waiting area and began reading. And with every page I turned, with every number I saw, I felt my heart grow smaller and harder and colder. The numbers didn't lie. Numbers never lie. In 3.5 years, they had gone through $78,000 of my pension. $78,000. Money I'd earned by standing on concrete floors until my feet swelled. Money I'd earned by working through flu and fever because I couldn't afford to miss a shift. Money I'd earned by sacrificing so much for so many years. I saw withdrawals for $700 at electronics stores, $1,200 at fancy restaurants I'd never set foot in, $1,500 at a jewelry store, $3,000 at a travel agency for a vacation they took without me, while I stayed home eating canned beans. Purchase after purchase after purchase, luxury after luxury after luxury, all paid for with my sweat, my pain, my dignity. But the worst part wasn't even the big expenses. The worst part was the small details that revealed just how little they thought of me. Withdrawals of $30 at bars at 1 a.m, $75 at nail salons every other week, while I wore the same 3 worn dresses, while I cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror because I didn't want to burden them with the cost of a haircut, while I refused to buy the arthritis medication my doctor prescribed because I didn't want to be a financial drain. They were living like royalty. Margaret came back after about an hour. "Are you okay, ma'am? You look pale. Can I get you some water?" That's when I realized tears were running down my face. I hadn't even noticed I was crying. "I'm fine," I lied, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "I just need to ask you something. Is it possible for me to change my banking information? To have my pension deposited into a completely new account? A card that only I have access to?" Something shifted in Margaret's expression. Understanding flooded her eyes. She'd seen this before. I could tell from the way she nodded. "Of course, it's possible, ma'am. I can help you with that right now if you'd like. I just need to see your identification and have you sign some forms." My hand moved to my purse almost automatically. "Yes," I said, and my voice came out stronger than I felt inside. "Yes, I want to do it immediately. I want a new account, a new card, something that no one else can access, something that's mine and mine alone." Margaret worked quickly and efficiently. She explained every single step, every form I was signing, making sure I understood exactly what was happening. In less than an hour, I had a brand new account with a shiny new debit card that would arrive at my address in 5 business days. My pension for next month would be deposited directly into that new account, into a place where Sophia and Daniel couldn't reach it, couldn't touch it, couldn't steal it anymore. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" Margaret asked when we were finished. "Yes," I said, surprising myself once again. "I want 3 extra copies of these statements, complete sets of everything. If I was going to do this, if I was going to reclaim my life, I needed to be prepared for what was coming next." Margaret printed the copies without asking why I needed them. Maybe she already knew. Maybe she'd helped other women in similar situations. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought I was. I left the bank with my purse heavier, carrying not just papers, but also a new sense of purpose. The sun seemed brighter than when I'd gone in, or maybe I was just seeing it clearly for the first time in years. For 3.5 years I'd been living in a fog of grief and manipulation. But that fog was lifting now, burning away in the light of truth. An ugly truth, but a truth that would set me free. On the bus ride back, I held my purse close to my chest and watched the world go by. We passed the bakery where Thomas used to buy me chocolate croissants on Sunday mornings. We passed the park where Sophia learned to ride her bike, her little legs pumping as Thomas ran beside her shouting encouragement. We passed the old movie theater where we'd spent countless Friday nights as a family, sharing popcorn in the darkness. All those beautiful memories, all those precious moments that I treasured for so many years. And yet here I was, a 71-year-old woman forced to protect herself from her own daughter. Life had a cruel sense of irony sometimes. When I got back to the apartment, Sophia was at work, and Daniel was snoring on the couch, the television blaring some football game. I crept quietly upstairs to my small room and hid the papers at the very bottom of my suitcase, underneath my underwear and old socks. No one would think to look there. No one would suspect that the foolish old woman they'd been manipulating had the intelligence to gather evidence. I sat on my narrow bed and looked around my cramped room. The beige walls with paint peeling in the corners. The tiny window that barely let in any light. The miniature closet where my few clothes hung like sad ghosts. This wasn't a room for a beloved family member. This was storage space, a place to keep the maid who cooked their meals, cleaned their messes, and paid their bills. But in 5 days, when that new card arrived, everything was going to change. In 5 days, I would start taking back not just my money, but something far more valuable, my self-respect. My right to exist as more than just a source of income for people who'd forgotten what love actually meant. The next 5 days felt like 5 years. Every morning I woke up wondering if today would be the day. Every time I heard footsteps on the porch, my heart would leap into my throat. But I had to act completely normal. I couldn't raise any suspicion. I had to keep being the submissive, obedient Victoria they expected. On the 3rd day, Daniel noticed something different about me. I was serving dinner when he looked at me with narrowed eyes. "You've been acting weird lately, Victoria. Something wrong with you?" His tone was accusatory, like I had no right to have thoughts of my own. "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my eyes on the chicken I was plating. "Just tired. You know how it is at my age. Everything hurts a little more every day." I let my shoulders slump forward, made my voice sound weaker. It was a role I'd been playing for years. A few more days wouldn't make any difference. That night, Sophia came home loaded down with shopping bags from expensive stores. The logo screamed money. "Mom, I need you to steam this burgundy dress for tomorrow night. Daniel's taking me to that new steakhouse everyone's talking about," she said, dumping the bags in my room like it was the most natural thing in the world. I looked at that dress, which probably cost $300 of my pension, and felt something finally snap inside me. "Why don't you steam it yourself?" The words escaped before I could stop them. Sophia spun around to face me, her eyes wide with shock. "What did you just say?" Her voice had that dangerous edge I recognized from her teenage years, the tone that meant I was in trouble for daring to have an opinion. "Nothing," I said quickly, hating myself for my cowardice but knowing I had to wait. Just 2 more days until the card arrived. 2 more days and I could stop pretending. I'll steam it right after I finish the dishes. The 4th day nearly ruined everything. I was cleaning Sophia and Daniel's bedroom, a task I did every week, even though bending and reaching made my back scream in protest. That's when I saw an opened envelope on their desk. Curiosity got the better of my caution. I pulled out the paper inside. It was a credit card statement I'd never seen before. The balance was $22,000. $22,000 in debt on a card I didn't even know existed. I scanned the charges with shaking hands. More restaurants. Another vacation I hadn't been told about. The 70-inch television in their living room. New furniture for their bedroom. Everything had been bought on credit. And I knew exactly who was making the minimum payments each month, or trying to. My pension clearly wasn't enough anymore. They were drowning in debt, while bleeding my account dry. When my money finally ran out completely, what would they do? Force me to sell my house? Take out loans in my name? How far would they go? I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly shoved the envelope back exactly where I'd found it. Daniel walked into the room and found me dusting the nightstand with visibly trembling hands. "What are you doing in here?" His voice was sharp with suspicion. "Cleaning," I managed to say without looking at him, "like every Thursday." He stood in the doorway for a long, uncomfortable moment, his eyes boring into me. Then he grunted something I couldn't understand and walked away. I left that room with my heart pounding so violently I thought I might pass out right there in the hallway. That had been too close. Way too close. On the 5th day, the card finally arrived. I heard the mail carrier's footsteps on the porch around 11 in the morning. Sophia was at work, and Daniel had gone out to meet some friends, probably to spend more money they didn't have on overpriced drinks. I was completely alone. I practically ran to the mailbox, moving faster than I had in months. My hands shook so badly I could barely turn the key. There it was, nestled between junk mail and utility bills, a plain white envelope from First National Bank with my name on it. Just my name, not Sophia's name, not Daniel's name. Mine and mine alone. Victoria Marie Hartley. I tore it open with clumsy fingers and pulled out the new card. It was silver and blue, gleaming in the morning sunlight, and it felt like freedom in my palm. My name was printed across it in crisp, black letters. It wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was a key to a new life. A better life. A life where I mattered. I went inside and immediately called the activation number printed on the card. I followed every step carefully, setting up a new PIN that only I would know. When the automated voice confirmed that my card was active and that my next pension deposit would arrive in this new account in just 2 days, I felt relief crash over me like a wave. 2 days. In 2 days, when Daniel tried to withdraw money from the ATM, like he did every single month, there would be nothing there. And then would come the confrontation I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. That evening, Sophia came home in a foul mood. She'd had a difficult day at the boutique, she claimed, though I suspected it had more to do with a customer returning something expensive that Sophia had purchased with my money. "Mom, what's for dinner?" she asked, without even saying hello first. "Baked salmon with roasted vegetables," I replied, setting plates on their dining table. Like every Thursday. Daniel arrived shortly after, smelling like beer and cigarettes. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. He sat down at the table without washing his hands and started loading his plate before I'd even sat down myself. "This salmon is overcooked," he complained. after his first bite. "Can't you cook anything properly?" "I'm so tired of eating dried-out garbage." Something inside me turned to stone. I looked at that plate of food I'd prepared with ingredients bought with my money, cooked on a stove I'd paid for, in a house that belonged to me. "If you don't like my cooking," I said in a voice that didn't sound like mine, "then you can make your own dinner tomorrow night." The silence was immediate and total. Sophia stopped chewing mid-bite and stared at me like I'd suddenly sprouted a second head. Daniel dropped his fork. It clattered against his plate with a sharp metallic sound that seemed to echo forever. "What did you just say?" Daniel's voice was dangerously quiet. "You heard me perfectly," I replied, standing up from the table. My legs were shaking, but I forced them to hold me upright. "I'm going to my room now." And I walked away, leaving them sitting there with their mouths hanging open and shock written all over their faces. In my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out that new card one more time. I held it under my bedside lamp and saw my reflection distorted on its shiny surface. This woman in the reflection, with her deep wrinkles and silver hair, with her hands spotted and marked by decades of hard work, this woman was me, and this woman had just taken her first real step toward freedom. I hid the card in the same secret spot where I'd hidden the bank statements. Tomorrow would be Saturday, the day after would be Sunday, and on Monday, the 1st of the month, when my pension landed in the new account instead of the old one, my real battle would begin. But this time, I wouldn't be fighting empty-handed. This time I had something they'd underestimated for far too long. My own determination to survive. My own will to live as more than just a resource to be exploited. I went to sleep that night with a strange mixture of fear and excitement churning in my stomach. I knew what was coming would be ugly, painful, probably devastating in ways I couldn't fully imagine yet. But I also knew there was no other choice. I'd reached the absolute end of a road, and the only possible direction was forward. Forward toward light, forward toward freedom, even if the price was losing the only people I had left in this world. Because what value did those people truly have if they only saw me as a means to finance their lifestyle? What kind of love only existed as long as money kept flowing? The time had come to find out if there was anything real left underneath all that greed and manipulation, or if I'd lost my daughter long before I was willing to admit it to myself. The weekend crawled by in strange, tense silence. Sophia and Daniel watched me with suspicious eyes, like they knew something fundamental had shifted but couldn't quite figure out what. I continued my normal routine on autopilot, cooking their meals, cleaning up their messes, washing their endless laundry. But there was a subtle difference in how I carried myself. I no longer apologized for every little thing. I no longer kept my eyes down when Daniel criticized something I'd done. I no longer flinched when Sophia snapped her orders at me. Sunday evening, while I was preparing dinner in their cramped kitchen, I overheard Daniel on the phone in the living room. His voice was stressed, anxious, borderline desperate. "I'm telling you, Marcus, I need that loan by tomorrow morning." "Yeah, I know what I said last time. Look, my mother-in-law helps us out every month like clockwork, but there's been a delay this time. It's just temporary. I'll have the money by next week, I swear." He was already lining up backup plans, anticipating problems he didn't even know were coming. The lies flowed from his mouth so smoothly, it made me feel sick to my stomach. How many other people had he lied to? How many other people had he borrowed from with no intention of ever paying back? I barely slept that Sunday night. I tossed and turned on my uncomfortable mattress, staring at shadows on the ceiling, rehearsing in my mind all the things I needed to say when the moment arrived. The words felt heavy on my tongue. Years and years of silence, finally ready to break free. Around 4 a.m, I gave up on sleep completely. I got up and made myself chamomile tea in the dark kitchen, sitting at their table with only the refrigerator light for company. This was the same table where Thomas and I had shared thousands of meals together in our own home. The same table where I'd helped Sophia with her multiplication homework when she was 8 years old. The same table where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesday nights that somehow felt magical just because we were together. How had everything gone so wrong? At what precise moment had love transformed into a transaction? When had my daughter stopped seeing me as her mother and started seeing me as an ATM with a pulse? Monday morning arrived with heavy clouds and the smell of rain in the air. I got up early as always, my stomach twisted into painful knots. I made breakfast mechanically. Coffee, toast, scrambled eggs, orange juice. Going through the familiar motions, while my mind raced ahead to what was coming. Daniel came downstairs around 9:30, already dressed in nice clothes, like he actually had somewhere important to be. "I'm running to the bank," he announced, grabbing the car keys from their hook by the door. "Need to get some cash for the week." He didn't look at me when he said it. He never looked at me when talking about money. Like I was just a faceless machine that produced cash on command. "Have a good day," I said neutrally, though my heart was hammering so hard against my ribs, I thought it might break right through. Daniel left, the door slamming behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. I stood frozen by the stove, counting the seconds, counting the minutes. Sophia was still asleep upstairs. She'd come home late last night from some girls' night out, probably spending more money they didn't have on cocktails that cost $20 each. I cleaned up the kitchen with exaggerated care, organizing every single item with precision, putting off the moment when I'd have to go upstairs. Finally, when I couldn't delay any longer, I went to my room and pulled that new card out from its hiding place. I held it in both hands and took several deep, steadying breaths. Somewhere across the city, Daniel was standing in front of an ATM machine, inserting the old card, typing in his PIN, selecting the amount he wanted to withdraw, waiting for the bills to slide out like they had every month for 3.5 years. But this time, nothing would come out. This time, the screen would flash an error message: insufficient funds, account empty. I didn't have to wait long at all. 23 minutes later, I heard the car screech into the driveway. The engine shut off. The car door slammed with explosive force. Heavy footsteps pounded up the walkway. The front door flew open so violently it crashed against the wall, leaving a dent in the drywall. "Sophia, Sophia, wake up right now!" Daniel's voice boomed through the entire apartment, shaking with panic and rage. I heard scrambling upstairs, confused voices, rapid footsteps. Then Sophia appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, her hair a tangled mess, her eyes still swollen with sleep. "What's wrong? What time is it? Why are you screaming?" "The card doesn't work," Daniel shouted up at her, waving it in the air like evidence at a trial. "There's no money, nothing, zero. The ATM said insufficient funds." I tried 3 different machines, thinking the first one was broken, but they all said the same thing. What the hell is going on? There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Sophia grabbed her phone from somewhere and started frantically tapping at the screen, probably logging into their bank app. Her face went from sleepy confusion to wide-eyed alarm. "That's impossible," she whispered, staring at her phone. "Mom's pension always deposits on the 1st. Always, like clockwork. It's never been late, not once in 3.5 years. "Well, it didn't deposit today," Daniel snapped, his voice rising even higher. "And our account is in the red, deep in the red. I have payments due today. I promised Ivan money and he's going to lose his mind if I don't deliver. What am I supposed to tell him?" Sophia's fingers flew across her phone screen. "I'm calling the bank right now." "There has to be some kind of mistake. A computer error, something." I walked slowly down the stairs, one careful step at a time, holding tight to the railing. Each step felt deliberate, measured, final. When I reached the bottom, both of them were so absorbed in their panic, they didn't even notice me at first. Sophia had her phone pressed to her ear, and I could hear the tinny voice of a bank representative on the other end. "The account is active, ma'am. There's no error. It simply hasn't received a deposit this month. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "That doesn't make any sense," Sophia said, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "The deposit is automatic. It should have arrived this morning." She finally looked down and saw me standing there, our eyes locked, and something passed between us in that moment. Some unspoken understanding that everything was about to change forever. "Mom," Sophia said slowly, lowering her phone with a hand that trembled slightly. "The bank says there was no deposit into our account this morning. They're saying everything is fine on their end, that the account is active, but the money didn't come. Do you know anything about this? Daniel turned toward me too, his face still flushed bright red, veins standing out on his neck like ropes. Did you talk to someone at the pension office? Was there some kind of problem? Did they freeze your benefits or something? I took a deep breath, feeling all the anxiety and fear of the past week transform into something cold and clear and unshakable. There's no problem with my pension, I said in the steadiest voice I could manage. Actually, it arrived exactly on time this morning. Every penny of it. The silence that crashed down around us was so absolute, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I could hear a car driving past outside. Time seemed to stretch and slow and almost stop completely. What? Sophia was the first to break that silence, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you talking about? What do you mean it arrived? I mean exactly what I said, I replied, standing up as straight as my old back would allow. My pension deposited this morning. My $1,800 are safe and sound in my bank account. My new bank account, an account that only I have access to, an account that you can't touch. Daniel took 3 fast steps toward me, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. What did you do? His voice came out like a growl, low and dangerous. When did you change the account? Why would you do this? We're family. About a week ago, I said, and there was something liberating about finally speaking the complete truth. I went to the bank. I opened a new account. I changed all the direct deposit information so my pension goes there instead, where neither of you can access it, where it belongs. Sophia's hands flew to her mouth as tears started streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of sadness or remorse. These were tears of pure panic. Mom, you can't do this. That money, we need that money. We have bills stacked up everywhere. We have people we owe. How are we supposed to survive? How are we going to eat? I looked directly into my daughter's eyes. The daughter I'd carried for 9 months. The daughter I'd held against my chest and promised to always protect. The same way I survived for 44 years before I retired, I said firmly. By working, by earning money with your own labor, instead of stealing from someone who loves you. Stealing? Daniel exploded, his voice going up another octave. How dare you use that word? We didn't steal anything. You live under our roof. You eat our food. You use our electricity and water. We've been supporting you for years. Contributing your pension was the absolute minimum you could do to pay us back. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest. It was bitter and harsh and felt like broken glass in my throat. Our roof, I repeated slowly. That's interesting, Daniel, because the property deed for this house still has my name on it, and my late husband's name right beside mine, Thomas Edward Hartley. This house that we purchased 37 years ago with every penny we could scrape together. This house where we raised our daughter. This is my house, not yours. I pulled the stack of papers from my purse where I'd hidden them that morning, knowing this moment was coming. I threw them onto their coffee table with enough force that they scattered across the surface. Bank statements, pages and pages of numbers and dates and evidence. You want to talk about money? Let's talk. Let's lay everything out on the table. In 3.5 years, you two have spent $78,000 of my pension. $78,000 that I earned by standing on concrete floors for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 44 years. Money I earned by ruining my knees and my back and my feet. Money that should have been mine to do with as I pleased. Sophia moved toward the papers with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the pages, moving frantically from one line to the next. I watched her face change from panic to horror to something that might have been shame, but only for a brief second before it hardened into defensive anger. Mom, you can't. This isn't. She couldn't seem to finish a sentence. Words kept starting and stopping and dying on her lips. I can't what? I interrupted, feeling strength I didn't know I had flowing through me. Can't defend myself? Can't protect what's mine? Can't stand up to the people who turned me into their servant and their cash machine? Daniel snatched the papers from Sophia's trembling hands and started flipping through them frantically. His eyes moved back and forth, recognizing every purchase, every luxury, every excessive expense. This doesn't prove anything, he said, but his voice had lost all its conviction. These are normal household expenses, groceries, utilities, maintenance. But we all knew he was lying. The numbers told the truth that his mouth refused to speak. Normal expenses, I said, reaching over and pointing to a specific line on one of the pages. Is $2,300 at a jewelry store a normal expense, Daniel? Or this $3,000 vacation you took to Mexico while I stayed here eating canned soup? Or this $1,200 leather jacket that I saw hanging in your closet? My finger moved from line to line, exposing every lie, every manipulation, every theft. Sophia collapsed onto their couch, covering her face with both hands. Her whole body shook with sobs. "Mom, please," she begged through her tears. "Please try to understand. We didn't want you to feel bad about it. We thought you wanted to help us. You always said family comes first. You always said we should take care of each other." "Family does come first," I agreed, feeling tears prick at my own eyes. "But you didn't treat me like family, Sophia. You treated me like a resource you could exploit without any consequences, like a tool you could use until it broke." "You're being dramatic," Daniel snapped, but there was desperation creeping into his voice now. "We gave you a place to stay. We fed you. We gave you a roof over your head and company so you wouldn't be alone. That's worth something." "You gave me a room the size of a closet," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You made me work like a full-time maid in my own house. You woke me up before dawn to cook your breakfast. You made me wash your clothes and iron your shirts and scrub your bathroom. You made me feel like I should be grateful for the privilege of serving you. All while spending every penny of my hard-earned money on things I could never afford myself. If you feel the truth in my words, if you understand what I'm going through, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Tell me which city you're listening from. I need to know how far a woman's voice can reach when she finally finds the courage to speak her truth. Help me build this community of strong women who refuse to be silenced anymore." Sophia looked up at me with makeup-streaked cheeks and red, swollen eyes. "What are we supposed to do now, Mom? We have debts, so many debts, commitments we can't break. We're drowning, and you're pulling away the only life preserver we have. Those are your problems," I said, and even though the words hurt to say, they needed to be said. Problems you created by living far beyond your means. Problems you made worse by using me. I am not responsible for fixing the mess you made. Daniel stood up abruptly, knocking over a lamp on the side table. It crashed to the floor, but he didn't even seem to notice. "This is insane. You're being cruel and heartless. The mother I thought I knew would never abandon her own daughter like this." "Abandon her?" I felt anger surge through me, hot and fierce. "Me? I'm the one who abandoned someone? Daniel, Sophia abandoned me 3.5 years ago, when she decided I was only valuable for my bank account. She abandoned me every single time she made me feel worthless. She abandoned me when she took my grief over my husband's death and turned it into an opportunity to use me." "That's not fair," Sophia shouted, jumping to her feet. "I was trying to help you. You were falling apart after Dad died. You couldn't take care of yourself. You needed us." "I needed you," I agreed, my voice breaking slightly. "I needed my daughter to love me and support me and help me through the hardest time of my life. But what I got instead was someone who saw my vulnerability as a chance to exploit me. Someone who convinced me to hand over control of my money by claiming it was for my own good." Daniel started pacing again, running his hands through his hair repeatedly. "There has to be a solution we can work out here. Victoria, be reasonable. Let's compromise. You can keep some of your pension for yourself, but we need you to contribute to the household. It's only fair that you pay your share." "Fair?" The word tasted like poison in my mouth. "You want to discuss fairness? Fine, let's discuss it. For 3.5 years, I cooked every single meal. I cleaned every room in this house. I did all the laundry, all the dishes, all the shopping. I worked as your unpaid housekeeper without a single day off. Do you know what a live-in housekeeper costs? Somewhere around $1,500 a month at minimum. Multiply that by 42 months, and that comes to $63,000 you owe me just for my labor." I let that number hang in the air for a moment before continuing. Now add the $78,000 of my pension that you spent. That brings us to a total of $141,000. So please, Daniel, don't talk to me about fairness when you're the one who's been stealing from me for years. The room went completely silent except for the sound of Sophia's crying. She'd curled up on the couch, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Part of me wanted to comfort her like I'd done thousands of times before. But I couldn't. Not this time. This time, I had to stay strong. So that's it then. Daniel's voice had gone cold and hard. You're just cutting us off completely? Leaving us to drown? I'm leaving you to be adults, I corrected him, to handle your own responsibilities like adults are supposed to do. You're welcome to continue living here if you want. This is a big house with plenty of room. But it will be under my terms this time. What terms? Sophia asked, in a small, broken voice. You'll pay rent, I said clearly. $800 a month, which is far below market rate for this area. You'll buy your own groceries, you'll clean up your own messes, you'll do your own laundry, you'll treat me with basic respect, and you won't see another penny of my pension. Those are my terms. Take them or find somewhere else to live. $800? Daniel looked like I'd slapped him. We can't afford that. We're barely keeping our heads above water as it is. Then I suggest you get a job, I replied without sympathy. Or you get a better paying job, Sophia. Or you sell that expensive car Daniel drives. Or you stop going out to fancy restaurants 3 times a week. There are plenty of solutions available. It's just that none of those solutions involve using me anymore. Sophia started sobbing even harder, her cries filling the house. Mom, how can you be so heartless? Don't you love me anymore? Don't you care what happens to your own daughter? Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. For a moment, the pain was so intense I couldn't breathe. I love you more than anything in this world, I said, my voice shaking. I have loved you since the moment I first felt you move inside me. I have loved you through every single day of your life. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. It doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being so they can live in luxury while you suffer. Daniel's face twisted with rage. Your husband would be ashamed of you right now. Thomas would be disgusted by how you're treating his daughter. The mention of Thomas felt like a knife between my ribs. My vision went blurry with tears for just a moment. But then I thought about who Thomas really was. Not the imaginary version Daniel was creating, but the real man I'd spent 47 years with. Thomas would be ashamed, I agreed, my voice steady again. But he'd be ashamed of you, ashamed of how you treated his wife, ashamed of how you took advantage of her grief, ashamed of how you turned her into a slave in her own home. Thomas would never have allowed any of this to happen. I turned toward the stairs leading up to my room. You have until the end of this month to decide, I said without looking back. Either you pay the rent I'm asking and start acting like respectful adults who contribute equally to this household, or you pack up your things and find somewhere else to live. The choice is entirely yours. Behind me, I heard more sobbing from Sophia and cursing from Daniel. I heard something glass shatter against the floor, but I kept walking, step by step, up those stairs until I reached my small room. I went inside and closed the door firmly behind me. I sat on my bed, my entire body shaking like a leaf in a storm. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. I'd spoken every truth I'd been swallowing for 3.5 years. And even though my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, even though tears were streaming down my face, I also felt something else, something light and fragile, but undeniably real. I felt hope. The next few days were absolute hell. A cold war settled over the house like frost in winter. Sophia and Daniel barely spoke to me. When they had to communicate something, they did it in short, clipped sentences, or not at all. They started eating their meals behind their closed bedroom door, or they'd go out to restaurants they could no longer afford, racking up even more credit card debt just to avoid sitting at the same table with me. But I'd made my decision, and I refused to back down. For the first time in 3.5 years, I bought groceries just for myself. I kept my food on a separate shelf in the refrigerator, with my name written on a piece of tape. I felt ridiculous doing it, like I was living in a college dorm instead of my own home. But boundaries needed to be established, and this was where we were now. On the third day after our confrontation, I heard Sophia crying in her bedroom. Every maternal instinct I had screamed at me to go upstairs, to comfort her, to make everything better like I'd always done. But I forced myself to stay seated at the kitchen table drinking my tea, reminding myself that comforting her now would mean surrendering. It would mean returning to the same destructive pattern where I gave everything and they took everything and nothing ever changed. Daniel tried a different approach on the fourth day. He came into the kitchen where I was making lunch and sat down at the table with what he probably thought was a conciliatory expression. "Victoria, we need to have an adult conversation about this situation," he began in a tone that sounded rehearsed, like he'd been practicing in front of a mirror. "I'm listening," I replied, continuing to chop vegetables for my salad without stopping. "Look, I'll admit things got a bit out of hand. I can see that now. Family should be able to work through disagreements in a civilized manner, don't you think?" "I'm being perfectly civilized," I said, turning to face him directly. "I gave you clear options. Pay reasonable rent and contribute like adults, or find another place to live. I don't see what's uncivilized about that." $800 is too much," he protested. "You know we don't have that kind of money lying around. We have other expenses, other obligations." $800 for a 3-bedroom house in this neighborhood is actually a bargain," I replied firmly. "Most places would charge you $1,200 to $1,500 minimum. And if you don't have $800, then I suggest you make some changes. Cancel your streaming subscriptions. Stop eating out. Sell that ridiculous television that takes up your entire wall. Adjust your lifestyle to match your actual income instead of my pension." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Sophia is in bad shape. She cries constantly. She says you've rejected her, that you don't love her anymore. Is that really what you want? To break your daughter's heart?" His words were designed to make me feel guilty, to manipulate my emotions. And they worked, at least partially. My heart ached hearing that Sophia was in pain. But I held firm. "I love my daughter with every fiber of my being," I said quietly. "I always have and I always will. But loving someone doesn't mean you allow them to destroy you. It doesn't mean you enable their worst behavior. Sometimes, love means setting boundaries, even when those boundaries hurt." "She never meant to hurt you," Daniel insisted. But even he sounded like he didn't believe his own words anymore. "Maybe she didn't think about it," I conceded. "Maybe she never stopped to consider what this was doing to me. But that doesn't change the fact that it happened. It doesn't erase 3.5 years of exploitation. And now there have to be consequences." Daniel stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're impossible to reason with. I don't understand how Thomas tolerated you for all those years." He stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there with my knife and my half-chopped vegetables. That evening, as I sat in my room reading one of my library books, I heard a soft knock on my door. "Mom?" It was Sophia's voice, quiet and hesitant. "Can I please come in?" I hesitated for a long moment before answering. "Come in." Sophia entered and stood just inside the doorway, twisting her hands nervously. Her eyes were swollen and red from days of crying. Her face looked pale and drawn. For just a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, vulnerable and scared and needing her mother. "I wanted to apologize," she said, and fresh tears started rolling down her cheeks. "You're right about everything. Daniel and I, we took advantage of you. We used you. And I'm so sorry, Mom. I truly am. Please forgive me." I wanted so desperately to believe her. Every part of me wanted to wrap my arms around her and tell her everything would be okay. But there was something in the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Something in her voice that sounded more desperate than genuinely remorseful. "Are you sorry because you recognize what you did was wrong?" I asked gently. "Or are you sorry because now there are consequences you don't like?" Sophia let out a choked sob. "Does it really matter? I'm saying I'm sorry. Isn't that what you wanted? Isn't that enough?" "No," I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. "It's not enough. Because I've seen this pattern before, Sophia. Ever since you were a little girl, you'd do something wrong, You'd cry and apologize, and everything would go back to normal. But this time can't be like that. This time, apologies aren't enough by themselves. Then what do you want from me? Her voice rose with frustration. What do I have to do for you to forgive me? Tell me and I'll do it. I want you to change, I said simply. I want Daniel to get a real job and contribute to this household. I want you both to take responsibility for the debt you've accumulated. I want you to treat me like a human being with feelings and dignity, not like an ATM machine. And I want you to prove through your actions, not just words, that things will be different. You're asking for too much, Sophia's voice broke. We can't do all of that overnight. It's impossible. I'm not asking you to do it overnight, I replied calmly. You have until the end of this month. That's almost 3 weeks. That's enough time for Daniel to find at least a temporary job. Enough time for you to create a realistic budget. Enough time to decide if you can afford to stay here under fair terms. Sophia stared at me like I was a stranger. And if we can't? Would you really throw us out? Your own daughter and son-in-law? Would you make us homeless? The question hung heavy in the air between us. If you can't afford $800 a month here, I said, feeling my voice crack slightly, then you need to find a more affordable place. A smaller apartment, a room in a shared house. There are options, Sophia. It's just that none of those options include continuing to live off my pension like parasites. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, just looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pain, anger, disbelief, maybe even a tiny bit of understanding all mixed together. I don't recognize you anymore, Sophia finally said, her voice cold. This isn't the mother I grew up with. You've changed into someone I don't even know. You're absolutely right, I replied. I'm not the woman you turned into your servant anymore. I'm not the woman who let herself be used and manipulated because she was too broken by grief to fight back. I'm the woman I should have been from the very beginning, the woman your father would have wanted me to be, the woman who knows her own worth. Sophia left my room without another word, pulling the door closed behind her with more force than necessary. I sat on my bed listening to her footsteps fade away, feeling tears stream down my face. This was so much harder than I'd imagined. Every conversation felt like ripping open an old wound, but I couldn't give up now. Not after coming this far. The days that followed were a strange mix of tension and routine. I continued living my life, rediscovering small pleasures I'd forgotten existed. I started taking walks in the neighborhood every morning after breakfast, something I hadn't done in years. I joined a book club that met at the local library every Wednesday afternoon. I even signed up for a watercolor painting class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to try, but never had time or money for. My pension, that $1,800 that used to disappear into their accounts like water down a drain, was now mine to manage however I wanted. I paid my bills. I bought quality food that I actually enjoyed eating. I allowed myself small luxuries, a new novel from the bookstore, fresh flowers for my nightstand, a soft new blanket for my bed. And for the first time in 3.5 years, I was actually saving money, building up a financial cushion that grew with each passing month. About 10 days after our big confrontation, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang mid-morning on a Tuesday. I answered it and found myself face to face with a young woman in her late 20s with kind eyes and a warm smile. For a moment, I didn't recognize her at all. "Grandma Victoria," she said, and then it clicked. "Melissa?" I gasped. Sophia's daughter from a previous relationship from before she married Daniel. Melissa, who'd left for college 5 years ago, and who I'd somehow lost touch with completely. "Can I come in?" she asked, glancing nervously at the house behind me. "I need to talk to you about something important, and Mom can't know I'm here." I let her inside quickly, my heart suddenly racing. We sat in the living room, and Melissa took both my hands in hers. "Grandma, I've been talking to Mrs. Patterson, your neighbor from your old apartment building. She reached out to me on social media because she was worried about you. She said she hasn't seen you in years, and when she asked Mom about you, Mom kept making excuses." My throat tightened. Mrs. Patterson had been my closest friend before I moved in with Sophia and Daniel. I'd lost touch with so many people during these dark years. Grandma, what's been happening to you? Melissa's eyes filled with concern. Mrs. Patterson told me some things that made me worried. Really worried. So I came here to check on you myself. And then, for the second time in recent weeks, I broke down completely. I told Melissa everything, every painful detail of the last 3.5 years, every humiliation, every theft, every moment I'd felt worthless and used. She listened without interrupting, squeezing my hands, tears streaming down her own face. I knew something was wrong, she said when I finally finished. Mom always had excuses whenever I asked to visit you. She said you were tired, or not feeling well, or that you needed space to grieve. But something felt off about it. I should have come to see you anyway. Why didn't you? I asked gently, not accusing, just curious. Melissa looked down at our joined hands. Honestly, because Daniel asked me for money about 2 years ago, $500 that he said he desperately needed. I'd just started my first real job, and it was everything I'd managed to save. He promised he'd pay me back within a month. Did he? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Never. When I reminded him about it months later, he got angry. He said I was being selfish and greedy, that family helps family without keeping score. That's when I started distancing myself from them. I stopped coming around as often. Mom didn't try very hard to stop me. We sat together in silence for a moment, both processing how Sophia and Daniel's behavior had hurt so many people, not just me. Grandma, Melissa said firmly, you can't stay here. This isn't healthy. It's not safe for you emotionally or financially. Come stay with me. I have a 2-bedroom apartment across town. Or we can help you move back to your old house. Mrs. Patterson says it's still in good condition, just needs some cleaning and maybe minor repairs. You have options. You're not trapped here. Her words were like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I wasn't alone. I'd never been truly alone. There were people who genuinely cared about me, people who saw me as more than just a source of money. We spent the rest of the morning talking and planning and reconnecting. For the first time in so long, I felt genuinely happy. Melissa's visit changed everything. It reminded me that I had value beyond what I could provide financially. It reminded me that real love existed, even when I couldn't see it. Of course, Sophia discovered Melissa's visit eventually. She came home from work that afternoon and found us sitting together in the living room, laughing over old photo albums I'd pulled from storage. Melissa? Sophia's voice was sharp with surprise. What are you doing here? Why didn't you tell me you were coming? Melissa stood up slowly, facing her mother with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. It was profound disappointment, mixed with barely controlled anger. I came to visit Grandma, she said coolly, something I should have done much sooner. We've had a very enlightening conversation. Sophia's face went pale. What did she tell you? Melissa, you have to understand. Things are complicated. You don't know the whole story. I know enough, Melissa replied. I know that you and Daniel have been financially exploiting Grandma for years. I know you turned her into your personal servant while spending every penny of her pension. I know you isolated her from everyone who actually cared about her. And I know that what you've done is not just morally wrong, it's actually illegal. That word hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Illegal. Elder financial abuse, a crime that could have serious consequences. Daniel appeared then, drawn by the sound of raised voices. When he saw Melissa, his expression darkened immediately. You need to leave, he said flatly. This is a private family matter and you're not welcome here. Actually, Melissa said, standing her ground, this house belongs to my grandmother, not to you. So I think she gets to decide who's welcome and who isn't. All eyes turned to me. I stood up slowly, my old knees protesting, but I managed to stand straight and tall. Melissa is always welcome in my home, I said clearly. Always. And Daniel, I think it's time for you and Sophia to start seriously looking for another place to live, because I don't think you're going to meet my terms. If you're still listening to my story, if you've made it this far with me, please take a moment right now to show your support. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and most importantly, Tell me which city you're listening from. I need to know that my voice is reaching other women who might be going through similar situations. Women who need to know they're not alone. Women who need to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Help me build this community of survivors and fighters. The rest of that day was chaos. Sophia broke down completely, alternating between begging me to reconsider and screaming at Melissa for interfering. Daniel made threats that he couldn't back up, talked about lawyers and rights and how I couldn't just throw them out. But I stood firm with Melissa beside me, giving me strength when mine started to falter. The following week, Melissa helped me move some of my things to her apartment temporarily. She took time off work to help me organize, to help me sort through 3.5 years of accumulated pain and trauma. We talked for hours every night, rebuilding the relationship that Sophia had tried so hard to destroy. Sophia and Daniel didn't leave immediately. They spent their remaining time searching desperately for somewhere affordable to live, which turned out to be much harder than they'd anticipated, without my pension supporting them. I heard Daniel on the phone multiple times trying to borrow money from friends and family, always being turned down because he'd already burned those bridges. One evening, about 2 weeks after my ultimatum, Sophia came to me one final time. She looked exhausted, defeated, like she'd aged 10 years in a few days. "Mom," she said quietly, "Daniel and I found a place, a small apartment on the other side of town. It's not what we're used to, but it's what we can afford. We'll be moving out this weekend." Part of me expected to feel triumph in that moment, victory, but instead I just felt sad for what could have been if only they'd treated me with basic decency. "I hope you'll be happy there," I said, and I meant it. "I genuinely hope you both figure things out." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Do you think we can ever fix this? Fix us? Is there any way back from here?" I took a deep breath before answering. "Maybe," I said honestly, "but it would take real change, Sophia. Not just words, not just apologies. Real, genuine change in how you treat people, how you manage money, how you view relationships. And it would take time. A lot of time." She nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes. "I know I don't deserve it, but I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope someday I can be the daughter you deserve. I truly do." That weekend, I watched from my window as Daniel and Sophia loaded their belongings into a rental truck. They didn't have as much as I thought they would. Most of their expensive purchases had been sold to cover immediate debts. The luxury car was gone, the designer clothes were gone. They were leaving with just the essentials and boxes of regret. Sophia came to say goodbye before they left. We stood on my porch, this same porch where Thomas and I had spent countless evenings watching the sunset together. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said one last time, "for all of it." "I know you are," I replied, and I pulled her into a brief hug. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart. And please, learn from this. Learn and grow and become better." Then they were gone, driving away in that truck, leaving me standing alone in front of my house. My house. The house Thomas and I had built our life in. The house that was finally, truly mine again. The next few months were a period of healing and rediscovery. I moved back into my own home permanently. Melissa helped me clean it from top to bottom, helped me repair small things that had been neglected, helped me make it feel like home again. Mrs. Patterson from my old building came to visit regularly, bringing casseroles and gossip and friendship I desperately missed. I replanted Thomas's rose garden that had gone wild during my absence. Every morning I'd have my coffee on our porch swing, watching those roses bloom, feeling his presence all around me. The house slowly filled with life again. I hung new pictures on the walls, I bought comfortable furniture, I filled the rooms with music and laughter from the friends I was reconnecting with. My book club became a highlight of my week. 8 wonderful women my age who gathered to discuss novels and share stories and support each other through life's challenges. I found community there. Real community, based on mutual respect and shared interests, not financial dependence. The watercolor class turned into a genuine passion. I wasn't particularly good at painting, but I loved the process. I loved mixing colors and creating something from nothing. I gave my paintings as gifts to Melissa and Mrs. Patterson and my book club friends. They hung them up proudly, even though they were amateur at best. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not somebody's ATM, not somebody's servant, just Victoria. A woman with interests and friends and a life worth living. A woman with value that had nothing to do with the number in her bank account. I heard updates about Sophia and Daniel through Melissa. They were struggling, as expected. Living in a small apartment, both working multiple jobs to try to dig themselves out of debt. It sounded miserable, but it also sounded like maybe, just maybe, they were learning something about consequences and responsibility. About 6 months after they'd left, I received a text message from Sophia. It was brief and humble. "Mom, I wanted you to know that Daniel and I have separated. It was a long time coming. I'm living on my own now, working 2 jobs, slowly paying off debts. I'm also seeing a therapist to work through some things. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to get better." I sat on my porch swing, holding my phone, reading that message over and over. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt genuine hope for my daughter. Not hope that things would go back to how they were, because they couldn't and they shouldn't, but hope that maybe she was finally growing up, finally understanding, finally changing. I texted back a simple response. "I'm proud of you for getting help. That takes real courage. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." Another 3 months passed. Spring turned to summer. The roses in my garden bloomed more beautifully than they had in years. I celebrated my 72nd birthday, surrounded by friends who genuinely cared about me, not about what I could give them. Then one warm afternoon, as I was watering my flowers, a car pulled up in front of my house. Sophia got out. She looked different somehow. Thinner, yes, but also more peaceful, like she'd shed some invisible weight she'd been carrying. "Hi, Mom," she said, staying by her car, respecting my space. "I was wondering if maybe we could talk. Just talk. No expectations, no demands. I understand if you're not ready." I set down my watering can and walked slowly toward her. "I'd like that," I said. "Would you like some iced tea? I made a fresh pitcher this morning." We sat on my porch swing together, sipping tea, talking carefully at first, and then more openly. Sophia told me about her therapy, about the things she was learning about herself, about patterns she'd developed over years that had hurt so many people. She didn't make excuses. She didn't minimize what she'd done. She just spoke honestly about her journey. "I don't expect you to trust me again right away," she said. "I know I destroyed that trust, but I want to earn it back, even if it takes years, even if it takes the rest of my life." "I appreciate that," I said, watching the roses sway in the breeze. "And I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, Sophia. Not even at the worst moments, but love isn't enough by itself. There has to be respect too, and boundaries, and honesty. I know that now," she said quietly. "I wish I'd known it sooner." We talked for 2 hours that afternoon. It wasn't a magical healing where everything became perfect again. It was just a beginning, a tiny seed planted that might someday grow into something beautiful, or might not. But it was real, and it was honest, and that was more than we'd had in years. When Sophia left, she hugged me gently. "Thank you for giving me another chance," she whispered. "Thank you for becoming someone worth giving a chance to," I replied. That evening, I sat on my porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "How did it go with Mom today?" "It went well," I typed back. "Really well. We have a long way to go, but I think we might actually get there." I looked at my reflection in my darkened phone screen. I saw a woman with honest wrinkles earned through living. A woman with silver hair that she no longer felt ashamed of. A woman with eyes that had cried countless tears but that now shone with something precious. Freedom, self-worth, hope for tomorrow. "Thomas," I whispered to the evening air. "I did it. I finally stood up for myself. I finally found my voice. And I think you'd be proud of me. Somewhere in my heart, where my most treasured memories lived, I could feel his response. I could hear his voice telling me what he'd always said when I accomplished something difficult. I'm proud of you, my love. I always knew you had this strength inside you. I'm so proud. I went inside my house, my true home, and closed the door behind me gently. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Tomorrow, I might hear from Sophia again, or I might not. Tomorrow, Melissa might visit, or Mrs. Patterson might call, or I might spend the day quietly painting watercolors that no one but me would ever see. But that was okay, more than okay, because tomorrow belonged to me. My time was my own. My money was my own. My life was my own. And that realization, that profound understanding of my own worth and autonomy, was worth every painful moment it had taken to get here. I was 72 years old, and I had finally learned the most important lesson of all, that self-respect isn't selfish, that setting boundaries isn't cruel, that saying no when you need to is an act of survival, not meanness, that you can love someone deeply and still refuse to let them destroy you. I was Victoria Marie Hartley, widow, mother, grandmother, friend, artist, book club member, garden enthusiast, and most importantly, I was enough, just as I was, without having to buy anyone's love, without having to earn my right to exist. I was simply, finally, enough.